give me a few minutes here to do some housekeeping things. First of all, let me thank everybody for joining the call today. As we mentioned yesterday, we're going to be on a daily call just to keep everybody updated as to what's going on with the Chamber's endeavors to help everyone get through what we're facing here, these uncertain times. So we're working hard to come up with topics we think will address a changing environment almost on an hourly basis. So again, thanks for joining us. We'd love some feedback too. So if you all have any thoughts, you can either chat with us and let us know what topics you would like to see going forward. We'll be doing this for the foreseeable future. You can engage with us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, at GSO Chamber for the latest information. You may have also noticed we've been sending out a daily email to our members. We're hopefully going to add a recording of this call and any relevant links. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty with yesterday's recording, but we got a couple of backups in place for today's call, so you can keep your fingers crossed. We're all learning new tools and new skills as we go through this. So be patient with us. We're working as hard as we can on that. If you're not a member and you're on this call, all links to the resources and the recordings will be on our website. You can find that at greensboro.org /COVID-19. A little last bit of housekeeping before we dive in here today. Yesterday we had a couple of questions about volunteer opportunity. And we've heard from One Blood, which is the main blood supplier for Cone Health. All of their blood drives have been canceled and their supplies are significantly impacted, as you might imagine. So if people go to their website at oneblood.org, you can schedule a time to donate and even stay in your car until they call you into the facility individually. It's a really easy way to get involved and help the community. We know that those blood supplies are needed at all times, and especially now. So hopefully you all will heed that and go make a blood donation. Today with us we have Scott Baker. Scott has 27 plus years in the banking industry. The majority of that time has been in commercial lending and management positions. He's currently president of TowneBank Triad, responsible for the establishment and growth of their Triad presence. And we want to thank him. Thank you, Scott, for taking the time to be with us today. How are you today?
I'm good. I appreciate the time as well. I'm glad to participate. I want to commend the Chamber for all you're doing relative to communication, both online, via your emails, setting up these chats with different topics. I think it's a great idea to try to keep our membership informed in order to make sure that we're all doing what we can to help the small business community here in the Triad. So thank you all for all that you're doing on a routine basis.
We appreciate that. As I said yesterday, our job is at the Chambers, when you get down to the basic blocking and tackling, which I know a lot of us are in today's environment, we're all about connections, connecting people, connecting businesses, connecting resources, connecting issues with solutions. So we're all about those connections, and you're an important connection today. So let me kick things off from a banking standpoint, and drawing on your 27 years of experience. What are the 2 or 3 things, and maybe even more than that, that small business owners and managers should be doing with their lenders, their banking relationships right now, facing these uncertain days? What should they be doing, Scott?
Yeah, so I'm going to start functional, but I'm going to say 3 things. As you mentioned, 2 to 3. I'll pick 3. We're going to go over what I'm going to call some practical steps first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about communication with your banker. And then the last thing is just being prepared. But let's start on the practical side. For all of you having accounts, things that we're not accustomed to are disruptions to the routine. And by disruptions to the routine, if you've not established certain digital means for conducting your banking business, you want to make sure that you're starting to do that. As offices start to move, some offices have started to move to drive-through only. Hours are getting reduced. You're going to want to make sure that you know and have functional access to paying bills, handling different things, potentially online. You want to make sure that you have refreshed your signature authorities with the bank and reviewed that possibly with your banker, meaning do you have a backup individual for handling bill payment and account transfers in case someone goes on quarantine or worse yet becomes sick, unable to handle those responsibilities that they need to on a daily basis. You may want to think about having someone with capacity to do that. The time to do that is not when you realize there's a challenge. Time to do it is hopefully a little bit in advance on that end. And there are other mechanisms, using remote image capture for making check deposits, using mobile deposit, other things that you have access to. And many of you are probably already using those features, which is great, but those that are not comfortable with it and routine of going into the bank to handling those or sending an employee into the bank to handle those, you want to start looking into what does that look like for me in my banking relationship and how can we move to a digital platform where that's needed. So those are some initial practical steps on the deposit side. I really would encourage you to review the signature cards to make sure that you've got some redundancies for authorizations to handle that. Same with online approvals. Often the bank and you will establish online approvals for certain individuals in your firm. You're going to make sure that you've refreshed that, looked at that, made sure that you've got redundancies there in case someone is needed to approve X type of transactions, that you've got another person in case that person goes offline or is unable to handle that responsibility for whatever reason. So those are some practical steps. Now, the most important, I'm going to say, is communication. You really need to make sure that you're communicating with your banker now more than ever. Candidly, it needs to be very transparent and honest communication, and you should expect the same right back from your banker. If you've got some concerns or you're wanting to get some information relative to, but we'll talk about lending in a minute, but even on the deposit side, like I talked about, and you're not getting the responsiveness, candidly, now's not the time to be patient. You need to make sure that you keep engaging your bank or your banker, and if you're not getting the attention, then you need to find someone who can give that to you, because things are changing rather rapidly and things are rather fluid, and you need to make sure you're getting the answers to your questions and on a routine basis relative to that. So I'm going to tell you, communication is really critical, and in order to have that best communication, let's move to lending. And these are cursory comments. I know we'll have some questions, but let's move to potential. I see that I anticipate I may need a working capital loan or a line of credit while I work with this period of time. Then the thing that I'm going to ask you to make sure of is, number one, that you have looked at your current financials and made sure that you have those available for a discussion with your banker. Certainly having year-end 2019 financials, having your 2018 business financials available for that discussion. I would encourage you, if you can, to run some projections from where you are today and what you see going forward, and look at, if you see some declines in revenue, then build those in, a 10%, a 20%, and show what that looks like so you can have an ongoing discussion, a more fruitful discussion with your banker around that. And you're going to want to look at what variable costs that you have that you might be able to control. Part of this could be decisions where you're looking at, what do I need to borrow in order to work through some period of time, as well as what costs can I control to help reduce some of those expenses during this time. And the two of them together is the synergistic response. You don't want to just go borrow without a lot of that dialogue and conversation and thought pattern, because you could end up incurring debt for some things that really you may not get the benefit from during that period. So, really it's review your deposit relationship, making sure that you've gone through the signatories, that you're communicating with your banker, and candidly that you're expecting that same level of communication back from your banker. And third, that you're doing as much as you can on the front end to be prepared, so that when you are having that candid communication with your banker, that can be the most fruitful it can be. So that's a quick response. I'll let you go into, we can go into more detail on any one of those.
That's great, Scott. We're getting a little bit of feedback here. I'm sorry, Scott. Work through some technical details here. Walk me through your involvement in the past with SBA and your thought for how the federal government and SBA will be engaged, could be engaged in advice for folks who might want to engage federal government and SBA as we go forward.
Well, there is, they've been making announcements relative to the federal government with the SBA disaster assistance loans. Those have come up, those loan amounts are up to $2 million. And they are available for those who do not have access to capital elsewhere. They're very concrete around if you have credit available elsewhere, you're not eligible for this program. But if today you don't have a line of credit, do not have a working capital loan with availability, and you're seeking that, the SBA has developed this new response disaster assistance loan program. I will tell you that there is a little bit of quote unquote red tape that still has to finalize within each state to include North Carolina, that once those, and they're working with the governors now, they have to go through a declaration where we've got an economic injury disaster declaration. Once that's done, then those loan programs will start becoming available. I expect all that to move rather quickly.
I think Scott, what we're hearing at the federal level is probably in the next 24 hours that they're getting all that red tape out of the way. I think.
I would imagine that to be very good. I imagine that to be the case. The terms are very productive for borrowers. So you have an interest rate that is 3.75 for small businesses. Nonprofits are 2.75%. And they are willing to keep the payments, in order to keep the payments affordable, though they're willing to look at maximum terms up to 30 years. So they really could make these payments much more manageable while people work through this working capital. I'm sure there's not been a lot of specifics given yet. It's just the generals. I'm sure there are going to be some means in order to be able to repay that note a little quicker if that's necessary. But they are working to get this capital out and available. There are several great SBA access points here in town. Candidly, self-help is a great access point here. You know, we of course partner and work with TowneBank, and other lenders do as well. And so I'd encourage you, if you're looking for SBA, reach out to your bank, reach out to self-help, ask the questions about it. And if they don't have that individual program, they can recommend you to SBA lenders that would have access to that.
And Scott, I think I also saw on some paperwork today that a lot of people think this is just businesses, but I'm also seeing that nonprofits are going to be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It is for nonprofits. And in fact, the nonprofits get a little bit of a reduction in the interest rate. As I was mentioning, the interest rate for small businesses is 3.75%, but nonprofits is identified at 2.75%.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And just to tease a little bit, we will have somebody on from the small business SBTDC on the phone with us tomorrow, on this call with us tomorrow to talk more about particular details on that.
Yeah, and if individuals are interested, there is some information starting to be available on the SBA website, which is sba.gov, so sba.gov. You're able to see some of that info at this point, and often they will also link to available lenders in the market. But again, I'm confident if you reach out to your local bank or other lending partners, if we don't have that option available directly at our institution, we can get you to those who do.
And I think, Scott, also, I'm looking at that website right now on my computer. If you go to sba.gov/disaster, there's already kind of an initial application up. I don't know how far that'll take you, but I think they're encouraging folks to go ahead and get in the queue by filling out that application.
Perfect.
So there is something you can be doing now while we wait for the federal government. And like I said, I think from what we're hearing, we'll know something in the next 24 hours, and that's why we're moving up the SBTDC speaker to tomorrow.
Yeah.
I would say also one of the other things that you mentioned having this dialogue with your banker. Do you anticipate as we go forward banks being able to change the terms of credit tools, credit lines of credit, and other things that might already be in place? Is that a conversation that you think would be welcomed, and how does something like that work, Scott?
Yeah, so certainly a good banking partner is going to want to have a conversation with their client and work to accommodate what's happening in this current climate. And so banks are going to be very much open to that dialogue, and then discussion around if there are modifications we need to make, what do those look like for the betterment of the business and the borrowing entity. So those could look like a term loan that was for a piece of equipment. Let's use a manufacturer as an example. We bought a piece of equipment. We have a large term loan for that. Unfortunately, now we're in a state where I might not be getting my material supplies because they come from overseas. Those have been halted. I can't produce the product that I was set up to produce. Obviously, then I can't sell the product. And so I've got a loan payment that I need to make. Bank can look at setting up potentially some deferral, but certainly look at some interest only for a period of time until we can get back and things get back up to running. And so those are dialogues that you need to, again, have with the banker. But that's part of my comment around being prepared. Make sure that it's not just a call up the banker, I'm experiencing this, but it's a call up the banker, make sure that you and the banker have got most current financials, certainly through year end 19, and that you're looking at what you expect projections to be for here going through this period of time. And you can do some standard month-to-month numbers that you've been experiencing, and then it could be as simple as, okay, if I take that and I take off 10% of revenue, I take off 20% of revenue, I take off 30%, whatever those numbers look like, do that. Look at your variable costs, those things you can control, see what else you can reduce if those revenue reductions occur, and make sure that you've made some of those adjustments as well, and then start having that dialogue with the bank so we can get to a good defined number. You don't want to overborrow in this case, and you certainly don't want to underborrow, which goes back to really having good, candid dialogue with your banker around what's happening with your business, what you're expecting to see, and that you all are looking off the same playbook, so to speak, around the activity. And again, the banker needs to be very candid and transparent with you on how things are going to be assessed and looked at. So we're all looking at the same opportunity and how we can handle those changes.
So Scott, I know that some small businesses or some businesses have, full finance and accounting departments and operations. Most small businesses, the owner takes on that responsibility.
That's right.
So that now you're asking for 2 years worth of financials and projections and that sort of thing. Help put some fear at ease as to what exactly, that looks like. What do you look for, when somebody comes in that doesn't have, 10 accountants that have been working on their things, and it's just them, and maybe some outside accounting.
Totally understand that. First of all, historically, 18 and 17 tax returns are most likely should have been filed, and those can be an access point. 19 year-end numbers could be internally prepared numbers that you get off of your Quicken, or other financial software programs that you may be keeping. And so that can just produce a year-to-date P&L and a balance sheet as of December 31, 19. The interim numbers are certainly just the same, something from your local office that you have. They don't have to be a CPA-prepared financial statement. That's not what we're looking for. And projections, to ease that mind, again, it could very well just be I printed off my January, February, March and looked how that went. And then I started adjusting those numbers with a pencil next to it that indicated what if revenue went down 10%? What does that number look like? And I held expenses the same. Or what if I was able to reduce certain expenses by 5%? Or what does that look like? And how does that affect that net income number? And candidly, if you need, you can come into the bank, and with those numbers, we could look through some of those things together and try to have that dialogue. Again, those are the discussions that you're going to want to have with your bankers so they can make sure that your lending request is well thought out, vetted. Number one, that it can get you through the period of time, but number two, that it doesn't overburden you going forward either.
Gotcha. What else, taking off your banker hat maybe for the time being, or maybe you never take it off?
Yeah.
What are some things that you would recommend that small business owners be doing right now?
I would also suggest that everyone look at their cyber insurance and see what they do have. There's, inevitably when there is a move to even more remote work, that puts potential employees and others accessing information from different spots that they may not have normally. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at your cyber insurance, understand what your coverages are, and make sure you're talking to your insurance agent about that. I think that's important right now. Fraud protection, all those items that you're going to want to make sure that you're paying attention to. I think you also want to be reaching out to your suppliers. Make sure that you're anticipating any disruptions from them. So if you're dependent upon a couple suppliers, key suppliers, and you find out that they're having a disruption to what they can provide to you, you either got to find out if you can find another supplier, or maybe even looking at now, if they don't anticipate it today, I would still be looking at some redundant suppliers that you could put in place in case you run into some challenges on getting your materials or product or goods that you need to conduct your business, and keep that ongoing. And then, of course, reaching out to your top members, clients, and making sure that you're having conversation with them around what they're seeing, their demands, any shifts that you can be aware of, so that you can make sure that you're being as responsive to that as well. They're starting to see some decline, and it hasn't showed up yet in orders or contact with you. That proactive reach out to those top clients is probably a really good step to be taking right now, so you can work to plan accordingly as well.
Well, that's I don't like what we're doing here. We're reaching out to all of our members this week. This was this actual series of calls was part of the discussion of what can we be doing for you going forward, and making sure that everybody has the information that they need to be able to adjust on the fly.
Yeah.
David, turning to you, do we have any questions on chat that Scott needed to answer? I think we may be having a little bit of a technical difficulty with David. Holly West, I'm going to see if I can unmute you.
Hey.
There you go. Are there any questions that are coming in on our Twitter feed at this point?
Not that I see. I know someone asked about SBAs, where they can go. Again, that website's sba.gov/disaster.
Gotcha.
Perfect.
I don't see any on. If anybody has any questions, you are able, if you go over to the right-hand side, you are able to unmute yourself. So if you'd like to unmute and ask a question, we would certainly welcome that. Doesn't necessarily have to be by chat. There we go. I own a very small 3 part-time employee art class business. Last Friday, all the classes were canceled. Can my laid-off employees collect unemployment until we get back? I believe that there's that the governor has put into place some pretty I don't know whether the term is liberal, but pretty aggressive activity around the unemployment insurance. And I think that the best place to go for that is to go to the state. We'll make sure that we get that question answered and get that website out, or at least the resource that you can call. Because I'm not an employment attorney. Scott, I don't know if you want to play one on the phone today either, but certainly we can help get the answer to that question. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's the right answer, Brent. We all have heard on the news and been aware that I do know the federal government and state governments are working aggressively to work to fund the unemployment so that we can handle some of these demands and needs for the community. So I know there is effort towards solving just this problem, but the functional way to do that is us to research through our local and state government.
Yeah. And we'll get to work on some answers. I think the good news is, and I saw this yesterday, was the state finances are in very good shape, including the unemployment insurance fund. So we're prepared for this. Brian Hart, are there resources for staff members who cannot work due to COVID-19? Any grants on top of employment? Unemployment, I think is, on top of unemployment is going to be the primary information or primary source for that. I think that there are some activities that are going on right now with the Community Foundation of Greater Greensboro, so stay tuned. I know there are a number in the community that are working on the possibility of filling in gaps where those gaps occur. So where there may not be eligibility for unemployment or not enough unemployment, where can we fill in those gaps? So we'd love to continue to hear from you as to where those gaps might be so that we can inform that discussion. So please do make sure you reach out to us so we know where those needs are and can work on that.
Yeah.
And you can see in the chat, if you're looking at group chat, there's the link that Deborah shared with everybody, and a phone number of 888-737-0259, as well as a link to the changes made in the unemployment laws by the governor. So you can take a look at that for yourself as well. And perhaps that's something, it's a great question. Perhaps that's something that we add to our list of speakers coming forward, somebody who could speak to that specifically. I know we're looking at attorneys and insurance agents and all that sort of thing to get to those answers.
Yeah. The one other item I would mention is relative to communication with your banker. It's never too soon, and certainly now it's definitely not too soon. So my encouragement would be, things are good. Orders right now are still staying steady from the manufacturer or some other. You're not in a direct impact from the social distancing changes that have occurred. However, you're not sure what's going to be happening 60 days out or 90 days out, and you have concerns about that slowdown. Now is the time to be talking about it, not waiting until you start to feel the effects of some of the slowdown. Some of us have already felt the effects of the slowdown in the community. There's no question about that. But I do and have conversations with many who are still continuing to move based on the orders and whatnot that were in place previous to some of this disruption. So I think there's still some effects to be seen, but I'd encourage you to start the communication today. Had several conversations with manufacturing companies that have not used operating lines or not accessed operating lines historically, but they are looking to establish those and set them up to have them in place in case there's something that comes up later, either late spring or early summer between now and then. So I would encourage that.
Okay, looking at additional questions. The North Carolina is not listed on the SBA website as COVID-19 eligible area. Thank you, Gate City Candy Company, for that. I'll be down in a second to visit you because I could use some sweets. Absolutely, anything to get out. And that's a great question. We talked a little bit about that earlier. We do expect that to change in the next 24 hours. There are some procedural things that were keeping that from happening, but they're changing those requirements. So stay tuned. And as a matter of fact, like I said, you've got me right into my next phase of this. We'll have another call like this tomorrow at 3 o'clock, where we'll have somebody who's an expert in that SBA disaster fund, the loan fund, that can help walk us through that. And so hopefully by tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we'll be saying North Carolina is eligible, and here's how you access it.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers that question. Anyone else? Great. All right, going once. You can unmute yourself and ask a question. You can chat. Let's see. I'll go to our site. Does anybody might have heard an unmute there? Maybe not. Go to our. Let's see if I can go to our Twitter account here. See if there's anything. All right. Seeing none. Scott, I will thank you for your time. I will thank everybody else for their time. This is perfect, about 30 minutes. I would encourage everybody to go and get some takeout tonight if you can from your favorite restaurant. They will appreciate it. Maybe put in a happy movie. My favorite is Love Actually. I know some folks will laugh at that. Love Actually. Great movie to watch.
I'll go with Hoosiers.
Hoosiers is a great one too. Make yourself smile and be happy this evening. But Scott, again, I can't thank you enough for this. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. I will make one last call for blood donation, oneblood.org. It's needed. And I will also say while you've got a little bit of extra time, perhaps you have a little bit of extra time on your hands in front of a computer, don't forget to fill out your census. It's going to be very important to us going forward that everybody is counted in Guilford County. So please go fill out the census while you've got a little bit of time. We're in the midst of a crazy time, but again, basic blocking and tackling. The census is a basic blocking and tackling item. It's going to mean an awful lot for Guilford County and for the state, and the funds that we receive from the federal government and the number of representatives that we're able to send to Washington, D.C. So please do fill that out.
I did it last night.
Awesome. Any last words from you?
No, just thank you for the time again. I'm glad to help. I know that the banking community certainly wants to help and be a resource to their clients and members, just the same as we do here. So however we can assist, please don't hesitate to call. Whether we're your bank or not, if you got questions, we're glad to help. You can find us in the phone book. Pretty easy to do. All right?
Great. Well, we'll talk to everybody again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Bye now.